Okay, so the other day um, I did kind of guest critique in the character animation class because one of our faculty members was out for the day. And I saw some really fine animations. Um, Assignments are all dealing with kind of these free provided characters, and the exercise was to deal with these big physical actions, maybe exploring some FK-IK switching. So I saw really good stuff, but a lot of students, when I inquired, said that they were having issues with FK and IK switching. And as I was looking at the animation itself, I noticed a lot of unstickiness, sliding feet, popping feet, these kind of things. So I asked a few of the students, just out of my own curiosity, to send me their Maya scene from what they worked on. So in class during the critique, they just showed the animations that they had done. The renders, the full renders. We weren't looking at the Maya scene. So I was just curious. For myself, I don't use FKIK that much. Part of it's just the nature of the type of animating I do, and when I have done character work, I haven't had to do that much. And I don't have that much experience with this character, so I wanted to see maybe for my own, education, what might be going on there. So curiously, so what I did here is I took the scenes that the two students had given me and actually just loaded Maya scene, and I started animating with the idea of just looking at the feet, the stickiness of the feet. So for the one over here on the left, that's currently in this T-pose, I did almost no changes to the animation other than just trying to get the feet to stick. Obviously, just put kind of a gray shader on there. I didn't have the textures, and I just wanted to use just kind of a default gray, so I could really just look at the motion itself. Quick little area light. The one over here, there's more of this karate animation that you'll see in a second. Required that I did just a little bit of animating on the root joint based on how I was kind of fixing the feet. So the whole idea wasn't to make this fully fleshed out animation on top of what the students had provided, but just to understand maybe what the rig was doing and how the students were approaching this, just trying to animate getting the feet to stick a little bit better. So I'll show these two little comparisons of each of these. Right? So you can see it's a nice animation and has a lot of good poses. There's a few little issues here and there, and it's a little difficult to see because we don't have the light, but if we'll just step through here. We get to this point where the foot lands. The one up on the top in the editor view is kind of sliding a little bit, also has a couple little bobbles right there. Right, so some of that can be FKIK, but it can also be a way that the feet are being approached. Let's look at this one here at the beginning too. So you can see how the foot up on the top one, up here, right? So you can see how that's wiggling and sliding just a little bit. So I was very conscious of how do I make that stick, right? And why are we getting issues with this? Let's switch over to the other side here. Right, so aggressive animation, right? Lots to deal with. There were just some issues. Let's look at this one here. And these are tough, right? These are not easy. So if we look at this heel here, and I don't have the grid enlarged in this, but you can see how it's moving, and there's not really a sense of the push off. If you get the idea that my little cursor should kind of bind where that foot had been, right? So we'll backtrack a little bit here. So what I tried to do is take an approach of how could the character pivot on their heel or the ball of their foot, right? And even here, I didn't totally finish off the animation. You see it is sliding just a little bit, but it happened quick enough. Was able to get away with some of that, I guess. But in each case here of these animations I looked at, it really wasn't so much the FK-IK switch, but it was the way that the IK foot controller was being animated. So let's dive in here. And let's just put that, let's tell this to go away. There we go. So I've increased, put a grid here so I could just see the feet and where their placement is. So again, this one here, right? You see, it's just not sticky, right? And it all comes down to how this IK controller is animated. So what I'm going to do is, let's switch this, just go to perspective. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time animating, but I just want to be able to make my point. Hopefully this is helpful to the two students, most important, but maybe this is, if other students are looking at this as well. Maybe someone else has a magic idea of how this would work a little bit better, but when I look at the IK controller, the whole idea of the IK controller is to allow the feet to be on the ground and stay put while the body is moving, right? And then we do an FK switch because the character is doing a ballet dance, right? And in doing their kicks, it's easier to get arcs out of their feet, not having to animate an IK motion path, but an FK. So if I look at this controller here, I'm just going to make note, frame 25 to 32, since this is set to be the FK IK switch, so 0 down here would be the FK IK is turned on. So if I'm at that point, if I select that controller, you can see the one that's been toggled in the visibility is Mary's IK foot control, right? But as I look at this, and it isn't as pronounced in this one, but you can still see that it's animated. Bring that up, right? So it's animated with a rotation in it, right? And it doesn't really have a great contact. I mean, I know it's supposed to be on the toe, right? This is a ballet dancer, but I think there's a better way to approach that. So for me, what I did, and I basically took this whole approach through each one of the steps, right? I would figure out where the student has intended for the steps to happen. Let's do it again. What were my numbers? 25 to 32, right? So let's just select this one. And what I did is I just put 0 for these other rotations, right? So I don't want it to rock up and down, and I don't want it to do this. Now there are some ways maybe you might want to do this in certain places, but if you're going to do steps, this is maybe not the right control to use. And we'll look at some of these other controls that have been added to help with this. So what I did is I zeroed out the rotation for the X and the Y. Now the Z, or I zeroed out the X and the Z, and I left the Y there. So this idea that maybe as you're animating, you're putting a foot in place for that step, that's totally fine, right? Oops, sorry, using my stupid magic mouse for this. So let's zero those two out at frame 25, and I'm going to just keyframe that. And let's do that one. So I'll leave that rotation there. That's fine to me. The other thing is, because we were rotating, it changed where the Y for this controller is. And if you're, when you're using that FK controller, if you just set it to 0, I know for sure that is on the floor, as long as your floor is basically even with the ground plane, right? So I'll just put a key on that. Right, so now I know that it's in contact, and we have that good contact. Now it's still up on its toe. In fact, we're actually getting a better sense of that because the student has animated the ball lift, right? So they're lifting the foot itself, and how that's working. But right now, that's a good placement. So I'm just going to double check and just keyframe all those. And 32 was the other frame, right? So I'm just going to use my middle mouse button. Sorry, my magic mouse likes to be fussy with this sometimes. Where's my little preferences here? And I'll just turn that on. And let's see if it wants to work for me. And it doesn't, because it doesn't like me. There we go. All right, so I'm going to do the little time warp that I love to do. So again, I'm going to come back to this and just key those so that I know that foot is basically the same. Now, if I do that, I just hit frame, and I did it 25, so I'm just going to select all this translate, rotate stuff. And just from a cleanup standpoint, I'm just going to delete all those. Because I'm just holding it flat. I don't want that foot to move. I didn't put a key on that the heel. I'm going to let that stay here, different from its other section. The other part here is this one. So again, frame 25. Maybe on the X I'll put 0. So right now it's nice and flat. You can see it's perfectly flat with the floor. And let's just go ahead and, the other thing too, we have these other rotations going on with the Y, and I would almost just 0 all those out. Because if it's on the floor, it's on the floor. And we'll zoom back over there. We said frame 32, I think, right? And let's just delete those. Right, so you can see that thing is stuck. And it's still doing all the things that we want, right? It comes over and lands here. We're getting a little bit of a twist based on whatever the information here on that. Let's see if we just maybe rotate that one. Right, because we're doing that FK, IK switch there. So just kind of blending those two together. That really makes a huge difference. And this is the way I always think of it. If I'm using the IK, it's kind of hard to see here. I just imagine, in fact, let's just do it this way. So if I'm looking at my character and they're putting the feet on the ground, I just imagine the controller laying flat, like as an outline of it. And that's anytime I'm about to make that contact, even if the heel is off the ground, I imagine that thing being like the little dance steps that you would see. When they show dance moves and you look at the drawings, it shows you where you put your feet, and that's how that works. I always think if this is where the step happens, then there's this flat outline that sits right on the ground, and that's where that's going to happen, right? So you can see I get a nice little stick right across that. Right? And of course, the animation happens pretty quickly. It jumps off of that. But I can work my way through over and over in those instances and try to correct for that stickiness. Let's go to this one here. All right, so the same thing here on this one. So right there is where the student wants it to land, right? So 46, and that's the other one where it ends off. 51, still on the ground. So let's just try that. All right, so we'll make it 0. Oops, not on that one. I want 0 there. And I don't want any X. And I don't want any Z. Right, and if I do need some lift, let's just do this, right? Right, so that was 46. Let's just do a little magic zoom over to frame. Boy, my stupid mouse. And I'll key all those, and now let's put a key on that one. (46 to 52). I'm just gonna delete all that. Oops, sorry. I think, what else did I get in there? I just wanted this stuff. There we go. I didn't want to undo the constraint or the switch, as I accidentally turned that off. Right, so you can see as it comes down, it firmly plants. It's on the ground. That's kind of nice. It's sticking there. Of course, there's this animating. This makes it a little bit more difficult. What we're doing here is we keep, let's toggle that back on. So if we're always animating all these various rotations on and off, we're going to run into problems trying to make sure that it looks, flat on the ground. Let's look at this one again, what we have. 0 through here. So let's look at these two steps to see what we did here. So firm comes off the ground, and of course, we're going to have to animate this switch between there a little bit better, how we want to deal with that rotation. That's more dealing with the IK stuff. And you can see this one, if that's where the plant is going to go, I just based that off the student's FK, IK. Maybe you make a change with that. Right? And if it's about to come off the ground there, then we just need to crank up that foot roll. Right? Let's see where that IK, FK, oh, it's actually list 51, so let's just move that over. All right, the other thing too about the FK, IK switching, don't be afraid to blend. So let's go back to, see that foot comes down. Where was the one we were dealing with there? Big change between those two right there. So let's just try it. Right, so don't be afraid to let the IK, FK switching happen over time. Okay? If you're careful with your keyframes, you can certainly lock between those two. You can even put keys into this. So let's just insert, oops, not where I want it. Right, so maybe we do want it to lean more towards the switch, but just not as much. Right, because before that was really rough and abrupt. Right? Maybe that's what you want. It depends on the motion. So these are just really quick, and I didn't bother with trying to, figure out my own ideas of maybe where some of these motions should be. This one kind of comes down and crosses over with that leg, right? So I have to maybe do some keyframing on that. Nice little shuffle there, right? Okay. Again, the same thing where we get a real big pop in between the two of those. Let's just look at there's our FK switch. Still quick because it's a quick move, but it doesn't pop quite as much. And so I'm just cheating in between those switches themselves. So where I'm letting the computer do some interpolation. Again, if you want to be very exact with it, you just have to be very careful with your keyframes at these joints, right? So maybe this is kind of obvious. Maybe it's just one of those. I will say in any of these, these are really complicated motions that the students are trying to do. The two examples here, and certainly the ones that I saw in class. So it could have been just a matter of time element, getting to some of these finer points. But I really would stress not animating the FK, IK, the little IK controller, unless when you want it to plant on the ground, right? When it's there, just leave it there and explore. I haven't even done this yet, right? So let's just go to these. There's keys on all of them. All right, so just for the sake of argument, right? So I can lift it just off the toe itself. I've got a heel lift itself. Right, you can see I can get that pivot here, right? So it's just called lean. I don't know why this isn't called ball twist. It's kind of a silly name, right? But you can see you can get a lot out of that one. So the reason these controls are there is because, one, your foot is a complicated little piece of mechanical engineering, biological engineering. But these controls are in there to help you with all of the spinning, right? And the rotation itself in the foot. So if at all possible, just start with this thing just being zeroed out. Again, if you want to rotate, or if you want to animate rotate Y, that's fine. But just leave the others, because as long as you don't change rotate X and Z, you always know if it's on the ground, rotate Y has that thing firmly planted there. And it will I think it will be a simpler approach for what you need to do. It's already complicated enough. It's ballet and karate, right? Anyways, it's late on a Saturday night. I have no idea if this was helpful, but hopefully it was.